that I care about and love, but wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go.
All right, so hi, beautiful people. If you are watching me on a replay, thank you. Sorry, thank you so much for watching me. I appreciate you. If you've never been into this broadcast before, my name is Celeste. Sorry. Sorry. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I come on, I talk to people that are doing things to empower other people. But one day out of that week, I do come on by myself. Oh my God, excuse me. I come on by myself and I talk about issues, and then I talk about solutions that we can do to deal with the problems. So if you want to find out more about me, you can visit my website, celestetherapist.com. You can learn more about me there. And then the podcast, let me just pull up the podcast, what it looks like, in case you've never seen the podcast before. This is what it looks like, and it's streaming on all podcasting platforms. And this is episode 230. A lot of episodes that can help you. Oh my goodness, hold on. A lot of episodes that can really help you kind of shift your thought process. So today I'm talking about how trauma can hold us back. A lot of times, hey, Andre, sorry, I didn't cough all day, and now that it's lights, camera, action, I start coughing. But we're going to get through this. So only 3 coughs allowed. I know. I just started. Okay, so let's get through this. We're going to make it do what it do. So yeah, if you've never been here before, I talk about issues, then I bring up solutions. Today's topic, I want to talk about how our trauma can hold us back. I'm going to ignore the comments right now. No. So I'm streaming on different platforms, and everyone's talking about my cough. Thanks. We're getting away from the subject. So sometimes our trauma can hold us back. A lot of times we'll tell ourselves that we're strong. Like that's one of the things that we tend to do, especially in the Black community. We'll tell ourselves that we're strong, and like saying strong is mean like I'm not sad, I'm not vulnerable, I'm not anxious, I'm good. And I think that one thing we don't understand is that not acknowledging that we're not good it can be detrimental to our mental health, to our physical health, to everyone, to our physical health. It can literally like shut us down if we are not acknowledging like the things that are happening in our lives. And so a lot of times, like, especially if you grew up in trauma, if you grew up in a traumatic situation, you try to figure out how to help yourself kind of survive. You've tried to figure out how to help yourself to survive, whether it was drugs, whether it was working, whether it was school. Sometimes it was disconnecting. Sometimes people struggle with remembering what happened in the past because they disconnected from what happened. Disconnecting was easier than dealing with what was going on in the moment. And so as a kid, that can be beneficial for you because you're not really dealing with the trauma because there's no, like a lot of times there was no options for people that, you know, were dealing with trauma as children. So we end up developing these bad habits, whether we're disconnecting, whether we're doing things, we're overworking, we're overdoing something that is really bad. And so we grow up and we learn how to stick it out. We learn how to survive. Like that's what we know how to do. Surviving becomes the norm. Living is abnormal. And living means like I'm taking care of myself. I'm putting boundaries in place. I'm saying no. I'm acknowledging my trauma. Like living is really like looking at what's really happening. And so one of the things that happens as adults is that we wear this mask, right? And that mask, I feel like, is comprised of 3 different parts. So one part is kind of like what society says, right? That's one part of the mask. Another part is our upbringing, the way we grew up. And another part is our expectations, like what we think life should look like. Like those three parts are narratives that really hinder us and really keep us stuck. And we don't even understand that that's the way that we are holding up. And we're holding up with this glue called sticking it out, right? The glue that keeps all those parts together is us doing it because we got to stick it out. I don't know what society's going to say if I do it this way. I don't know what my family's going to say if I do it this way. I got to do it this way because of expectations. Like so many different things come into play when we're thinking about this. And unfortunately, like as we grow older and as life happens, because life happens, we're triggered and we have these breakdowns. One of the things, and so I want to talk about solutions on how to deal with this, but I really want people to understand kind of what happens to your body when you're not dealing with the trauma. Because one of the biggest things that happen, hey, what's up, Wes, Big Worm? Hey, AP. I see you guys. One of the biggest thing that happens as we grow older is that when we haven't dealt with the trauma in the past, right? If we haven't dealt with the trauma, then as we get older, we will be in situations that will feel like we are not in control like we were when we were younger. Like the body keeps the score. I like to talk about this part a lot because a lot of times we have this logic around what it is that we should be doing, or we understand that it doesn't make no sense. When we really start to think about it, well, the logic kicks in. We don't understand like why we feel the way we do or why we do the things that we do. And a lot of times it's because you are channeling your inner child, that you that was never processed, that you never really dealt with. You're really channeling that. And because you don't understand you're channeling that, you freeze, you don't do nothing, you just get stuck. And you stay stuck. And you stay stuck in that trauma and you don't feel like you have a way out when we're never stuck. Like regardless of what your body feels like or what it feels like in certain situations, like be mindful on how you're describing the situations you're in because you're never stuck. There's always options. But unless you are in tune to it consciously, you won't realize that there's options. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's in your subconscious. And so when you start to like take pauses and really think about what's happening, you'll start to see solutions. Because one of the things I'm big on is like, I'm very solution focused. In the moment, there may not be a solution, but I feel like we can create a plan for it. So if you're somebody that's really stuck and you find yourself feeling like you use things to suppress the pain, or you don't really deal with your trauma, but you understand that your trauma affects you and you really want to work on dealing with it so that it's not dealing with you. And when I say so it's not dealing with you, if you don't deal with your trauma, you find yourself imploding, you find yourself doing things, you find yourself repeating cycles, trying to figure out why you can't stop the cycles that you're doing. And it's because you're not dealing with it. Your mind and your body never forgets. And if you take a pause and really think about that, my mind and my body never forgets, because your mind and your body has been a part of all of your experiences. So whatever you're trying to do to mask it, all you're doing is you're allowing your internal self to stay in control. And a lot of us have been so identified with our trauma that anything that goes against it will be like a threat to who we are. And I'm gonna say that again because it's kind of complicated. But if you grew up in a traumatic situation, if you grew up as always a victim, anything that goes against it. So if I'm trying to introduce this new lifestyle of like trying to live, trying to work on yourself, trying to create boundaries, and it feels hard to do, like you find yourself feeling like I can't stay consistent, I can't do this, it's because you're really in this battle. You're in this internal battle because what I'm trying to introduce is a threat to who you've always identified with. It hasn't been a conscious thing. It's been very unconscious, but that's the way your makeup has been identified. So if you can really acknowledge the way that you've been operating and understand that in this process, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a journey. It's going to feel weird. It's not going to feel normal. If you can like start to realize that, then you can go along this journey. So what I want to do now is just kind of give you these ideas to think about how to work on this. Stagnation becomes a result. Absolutely. And then the stagnation, you end up feeling guilty about the fact that you're stagnant in life. not realizing that you're the common denominator. Like, you have the answers. We all have the answers. Like, the power is within us. But unfortunately, like, we're not taught how to think this way. We're only taught how to survive. We're not taught how to live. In the work I do with infant and early childhood mental health, this is lots of the psycho ed I work with on parents. Absolutely, yes, that's so true, Christy. So one of the things that I want to have you think about is, like, how do I work on getting out of the cycle? So number one, acknowledge and accept what's happened. Stop trying to minimize it. Stop trying to make excuses. Stop trying to minimize it. You have to acknowledge. You cannot get to an issue. You cannot solve an issue if you can't even acknowledge the issue is there. How do you work on something when you're trying to pretend like it's not happening? So if you can really start to work on acknowledging, like, what's happening, don't minimize it, you can actually start to deal with it. So that's number one. Number two, reclaim control back. As adults, we hold the pen. What, who, how we allow things to happen is on us. We always have the control. It will feel like you don't have control. It will feel like you don't have options. But what do we know about feelings is that feelings are always changing. And so if we can push past the feeling of turning our alarm on to get to work in the morning, right? Nobody who wants to get up at 4 or 5 or go to work when you don't feel like it. If we can work on pushing past that feeling when we go to work, because remember, going to work is meaning that we need to survive, which we survive well, like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, we can actually push past the feeling that we need to do to be able to live. And so if you really want to live, you have to understand that you're not going to feel like doing the things that you need to do to actually live, to actually have peace, to actually experience joy, to actually no longer be a victim, to actually get the control that you have within you. And so that's number two, reclaim the control back. Number three, seek help and support groups. So one of the things about seeking help is that I really understand that it's not always readily available for us. There's a lot of barriers to getting support. And that's one of the main reasons why I started this podcast a few years ago, is because I really wanted people to know, like, it doesn't have to be the colonizing way of getting help. Like, psychiatry and therapy are the main two things in America that we talk about when it comes to healing. And if you've ever listened to me talk on these platforms, or if you ever listened to the podcast, I've spoken to a numerous amount of people who are doing different things to empower other people, who have shared their story, so that you can see that there's more than one way out. And when it comes to your healing process, it's never linear. It's not like a straight line. There's going to be some curves. There's going to be some different roads that you have to take, but you are going to be the person that has to take it. No one's going to come and say, like, Celeste, like, are you going to do what you need to do so you can work on living? Like, nobody's going to say that. And so I have to understand that I have to do the work. So there are different ways to healing. So it's important to find that support. And the support, what it looks like for me may be different than what it looks like for you, but I have to figure out what that is. Considering cross-dress, not really, question, I'm kind of curious how to be open about it. I'm not sure if that's a question. So the next question, number 4, take care of your health. Your physical is related. So taking care of your health is a big part of working on yourself, because our physical affects our mental the same way our mental affects our physical. Like, I never understand how we've gotten so far removed from being able to acknowledge how much mental health plays a role in our life. I don't understand it when it's all related, like it's all connected. And so when it comes to physical, I'm talking about your sleep, I'm talking about moving your body, and I'm talking about your food intake. Like, those 3 things alone, outside of trauma, outside of anything that's happening, can have an effect on your mental status. And so if you can really work on paying attention to how you're living, how you're treating your body, your only body that you have, and how it relates to your mental health, that can be helpful. Number 5, learn, this is important. Number 5 is so important. Learn how to accept and let go, mourn the loss of the life you should have had. And so a lot of people, like in the work that I do, I know that so many people were dealt like really bad hands, like really bad hands. Like, if you ever played spades and you got like a real bad hand and somebody had like all the spades, Like, that's the type of hand that somebody was dealt. Like, wasn't their fault. And so, unfortunately, a lot of times we hold on to that, and that becomes our anchor. Like, it wasn't my fault. Like, this is why I'm where I'm at. Like, and we keep carrying it and carrying it, and it keeps dictating our lives, and it keeps dictating our lives. You have to get to a point of mourning the loss of the life you should have had. That was not your fault, right? A lot of times, things that have happened in people's lives have not been their fault. Fault and responsibility are two different things, right? Responsibility for my peace, responsibility for my happiness is something that is going to be so crucial. And what Christy just wrote, the grief work is so important. And grieving is not just about a physical loss. It could be a loss of like the life that you had or the life that you should have had. And that grief work is really, really going to get you through this. But you have to understand that it's a part of the process. So fault, responsibility, two different things. And responsibility for your well-being and peace and happiness is always going to be on you, never on anybody else. Number 6, replace bad habits with good ones. In order to replace bad habits with good ones, I got to understand what those bad habits are. They may not always be the textbook bad habits. It may not be that I'm shooting up and using drugs or using alcohol to cope, right? Like, those are some of the things that are really like tangible that society kind of has already looked at as an issue. There are other things like shopping. There are other things like eating. There are other things like workaholic, right? Working is acceptable in society. Nobody would ever think that that is something that they've been using to cope. Eating is something that we need to survive. You may not really realize that's a way to cope. So really start in how the question you may be asking is, how is it that I can understand like what I'm using? And so when you are triggered, when you are struggling, when you are feeling stressed out, pay attention to the behaviors that you're doing during that process as you're stressed out. Pay attention to the behaviors that you're doing that you feel bad about doing, that you feel guilty about doing, right? Drinking is acceptable in our society. Like, you can go to the bar, you can have a glass of wine, and it's fine. But if you are drinking and you're finding yourself hungover the next day and you're finding yourself struggling, if you find yourself drinking to get through your day because it was so hard every single day or all the time, like, those are some of the things that you need to pay attention to. You are going to know you best, but you got to take time to think about it. Like, if you think that you're going to like pretend that it's not happening, life is going to catch up with you, right? Life is going to catch up with you. You know, and when it comes to sweets, Christy says, Lord, help me let go of the chocolate cake. And one of my things when I'm struggling is like, let me go get some chocolate. Like, let me go get some chocolate. Right. And chocolate's not a bad thing. Right. So like, if I have chocolate every now and then, it's fine. But if I'm overdoing it, then that could be an issue. Right. If I'm like, the doctor's like, you got diabetes, like you're getting overweight, like if those things start happening, then guess what? I'm affecting myself. Right. Because it's not beneficial to me. So it's something to really think about if you've never thought about this. The last step I want to say about this is to be patient with yourself, because it's the journey. Giving yourself grace is something that is owed to you. Like, you owe yourself grace, right? And when I think about people, and I've worked with so many different people over the last 17 years, people are actually more kind to other people. You give other people way more grace, that some of them don't even deserve it, than you give yourself. And so when you start to like talk down to yourself, when you start to beat yourself up because you started the process and stop, when you beat yourself up because you always be like, I can't stay consistent, be like, would you tell your kid that? Would you tell your best friend that? Would you tell your best friend like, oh, you forgot to do that today? You know what? Just don't do it at all. Like, would you ever give your friend that advice? Would you ever give your child that advice? Would you ever give somebody that you love that advice? 10 times out of 10, the answer is going to be no. For people that you love, you're going to motivate them and you're going to tell them, no, don't worry, you got this. Like, you didn't do it today. Okay, it's okay. You could do it tomorrow. Like, you're going to be kind to them. And so understand, like, as you're working on this process, because you're realizing, like, Celeste, this resonates for me. My trauma holds me back. The trauma that I'm dealing with now holds me back. I've really got to start thinking about this stuff. don't let this podcast be the last time that you are thinking about this stuff. Like, don't let it be the last time, because one thing about being in an environment that is speaking to your spirit or speaking to your soul is that it feels really good, right? Because you're placing yourself in this environment. Once this podcast ends, once you stop listening to this, you're back into the other environment, the environment that has identified with your trauma, right? That speaks to your whole your whole body makeup. It's easier to forget about the things that we talked about today and to keep going on with life until the next feel-good message comes along. And so you have to set yourself up to be intentional about creating the changes that you want to see happen. Because it's not just going to come on its own. It's something that you're going to have to be intentional about doing. And the responsibility is on you. The responsibility isn't the person that has gotten you to that place. Because I know there's so many different things that people can name or that people can point to that had them in a space to get to the place where they're feeling now. And so you have to work on forgiving yourself if you're the person, right? Sometimes we're the person that has caused us to be where we are. And you have to work on forgiving the other person. And forgiveness doesn't equate we have to be friends, or I have to continue accepting who you are, or I accepted what you did. It just means that you're no longer allowing that person or what had happened to hold you back. And that's on you. And, at the end of the day, that's going to be on you. So I hope this was helpful. This episode is going to be on the podcast tomorrow. So if you follow the podcast, episode 230. And if anything I ever say resonates for you, you can start making changes today. What time is it? It's 8:37. So at 8:38, you can literally start doing the work. Literally right now, you can start doing the work. And it starts you have to start somewhere to get to where you want to be, right? I had to start at episode 1 to get to episode 230. You just have to start doing the work. Definitely important not to hold people in your heart. Yes, so true, so true. And so when you start doing the work, even though your body's going to resist it because it's identified with the trauma for so long, but when you start doing the work, your mind and your body will have no other choice but to fall in line with what you're trying to create. And you can create it as long as you're still breathing. There's always room for change. I can't say that enough. There's always going to be room for change. Play out. And yes, it's so true that stuff can play out as a physical illness, which is why a lot of times people go to the doctor and the doctors don't understand why they are feeling the way they're feeling. Growing up, I had really bad back pain, and I would go to the doctor. I remember one time I was in a doctor hunched over because my back was so crunched over, and they just gave me muscle relaxers. They didn't know what was wrong. And as an adult, when I started to get more in tune with my body, I realized when I was overwhelmed, when I was anxious, I would feel it in my back. And so now, earlier I talked about paying attention to your body. Now, when my back starts to hurt, right, and I haven't done anything, it's just hurting. I feel pressure. I know that I need to check in with myself a little bit more. And so everybody's response to the way that they're feeling or the way that stress or trauma affects them is going to look differently, but it will definitely play out in the physical light, which is why I can't understand why mental health and our physical health looks different. Yes. Get you some Reiki crystals, faith, exercise, meditation, right? And everything that Christy's labeling, it's not what our traditional colonizing mental health system says, which is why I'm grateful to all the people that come on and talk about these different things, right? Unfortunately, insurance doesn't pay for Reiki. It doesn't pay for crystals. It doesn't pay for meditation classes. Why do you think that is? Because they want to keep us sick, right? It's all about making the money. So really doing your research, doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. No, it may not be conventional the way that you thought it would look like, right? Be open to new ideas on how to make it happen. And understand that it's gonna be some curveballs, but it's gonna be fine. It's gonna work out because you hold the key and you have the power, regardless of what was told to you, regardless of what happened to you. You have the power to make changes in your life, right? I can help you get to that point, but I can't make it for you. Like, you have to make it for yourself. So thank you guys for rocking out with me. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday, talking to somebody else. And if you want to learn more about me, you can follow me everywhere at Celeste the Therapist, or you can visit my website, celestetherapist.com. And yes, so true. Real quick, yes, so many free things right now because of COVID. There's so many things to tap. That's a really good point, Christy. There's so many different things you could tap into regardless of where you are, because everything's online. And you have Google, right? You have a phone. I know y'all got something, because if y'all watching me, y'all got something. So really start tapping into it. Don't let your lack of knowledge be an excuse to why you can't work on your healing, right? You hold the key. Never forget that. You hold the key. Love you guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Life that I care about and love, but wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with